Hi guys, welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Tonight's session is on 10-micron mounts, and Per Frejvall is here to demonstrate. And I hope I got his name right, the pronunciation of his name. Please correct me if I got that wrong. I'm pretty sure I did actually, so I'll give him a chance to pronounce it properly. But first, Eric Cole's M82 is our image of the week, and we're going to give Eric a few minutes to go over his beautiful image, and I'm going to try and pull that up on my screen while he does, and I have it right here. This is one of the best images we've showed on the Astro Imaging channel. So, Eric, go ahead and speak about that image for a few minutes.
Okay, thanks, Adam. The key to this image is a couple of things, the least of which is actually my processing. The first is it was done out at a very dark site, Sierra Remote Observatories on Bald Mountain in California in the Sierra Nevada. There was a presentation, what was it, about a month ago, Adam, showing what fine images you can generate when you have truly dark skies. Now, the other part is my imaging partner, Mel Helm. He's one of the principals out there, and he has got the mount and the 16-inch RC scope really tuned up. So it makes a pleasure that all I have to do is just log into the scope, turn it on at night, and then turn it off in the morning and download the data. We all know that we've imaged from some fairly ridiculously cloudy and light-polluted skies, and imaging from the dark skies makes all the difference. It makes processing really a pleasure. This image was accumulation of 55.5 hours of subs, including 25 hours of luminance, which really gives the smoothness to the image itself. The first half of the processing was done in PixInsight, in which we did, I ran the pre-processing script, then took the registered images and then stack them up with a separate process from PixInsight rather than using the one that's generated from the script. From that, I followed the two videos where you take each of the images, you do the same kind of crop on each, you take care of the background, you do the color calibration, you do the initial stretching and then some adjustment, and then the image gets dumped into Photoshop where some of the detail is really extracted out, and you keep working on it until you get something that you like. Then you post it on AstroBin. How I got from the gathering of the images through PixInsight, I could document how I got this image in Photoshop. I think there were at least three complete versions that I had to run through before I was satisfied. And I think the difference between this image and a lot that I've seen is that most of them, because of the data or because of the processing, the background, the IFN, the integrated flux nebula is usually gone from those images. I think that's a key part of this kind of images, and I try to bring those out as much as possible. The other part is, kind of those red sprites that you see in M82, and those were really brought out using Bob Frankie's process of putting your HA data in on top of the image when you get towards the end of the processing. That's pretty much it. If anyone has any questions about it, I'll be happy to answer. But oh, there is one more thing. I actually have taken that image and I've used another process within PixInsight to annotate all the galaxies. But unfortunately, I'm going to try to share that screen. No, it's the green button. Share. So this is the image running the PixInsight annotation process and then looking at 3 or 4 high-resolution images of this region, and anything that looks like a galaxy, I put a little circle around it. So PixInsight found 6 galaxies plus the one in the center, and I found 40 more by looking at the other images, including one of the Hubble images. Now, I've been told tonight that if I went to another database, there might be a few million, and in fact, we know from the deep sky, the Hubble Deep Sky image, that there are countless galaxies in here. But I just marked the ones that I could actually see. So this is the next version of that same image. Adam, I think that's about it. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Eric. And yeah, on that note, questions. If you guys have any questions and you're out on the YouTube side, there's a thing called Q&A. You can type your questions in right there, and I will, if I think Per is getting to them, I'll let him go for a little bit and wait. If I think it's right in the moment, I'll interrupt him and give him the question immediately. But I see there are a lot of viewers in the room right now. So I'm going to go right over to Per. And Per, did I mess up your name earlier? How do I pronounce your last name?
Sure you did. Everybody does. It's we have the silent J's in this language, so it's Frejvall.
Frejvall.
Yeah, that's pretty good. But we're getting there.
There we go. Well,
all right.
Go right ahead.
All right, thanks. Well, it's fun to be here, even though it is an ungodly time in the day, but it's getting light here right now. I have some daylight, or not daylight, but some twilight coming in through the dawn is approaching here. And it's been a cloudy night in my observatory in France, so I don't have much to do in terms of live things, but I did record some stuff for you earlier this week so that we can fiddle with the mounts. But I have I had to start with a presentation so that we get this going here. Now, how do I screen share? Let's see. There we go.
Hover over the green.
There we go.
We see it.
You see it. Okay, of course I'm not at the beginning here, but here we go. All right, so let's start. So I'll start with some just a few words about myself, and then we'll move on to the an overview of the products that they produce for in terms of mounts. And most people tend to look at the GM1000, the smallest one, as the first one to get. But in fact, I've been told that they sell more of the bigger brother, the GM2000. We'll look at that, the little one, and we'll look at how to set it up, basic workflow on that, and then some more on the actual sky modeling, which is one of the most interesting features of this mount. My favorite part, unguided imaging. I simply hate guiding. It's just a pain in the butt, and I never liked it. So this mount gives me that, unguided imaging. And then we'll top it off with some other things to consider in terms of mounts and the usage thereof. So start with me. Obviously, Swedish. I live east of Stockholm. Been here for about 56 years, almost 57. Now, when I was a kid, I moved to this area, which is east out in the archipelago, east of Stockholm. And in this place is the Stockholm Observatory that was built in 1929 to 31, so it's an old one. But I lived right near it, and as a 12-year-old, I started running up there and talking to the professors, and I even got to go out at night with them and help them with, carrying the plates back and forth and stuff like that. And it was fun. So a few years later, I was an exchange student in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That was 1975 and 76, and my physics teacher introduced me to an astronomy club, and I bought a handheld, I think it was 10-inch Richfield Newton reflector. It was a very nice telescope, and as you all know, the skies in New Mexico are pretty fabulous. So that gave me a lot of joy. I couldn't bring it home though because I couldn't get it on the airplane, so I left it there. So at that point, astronomy was dead to me. I did other things like raising a family, getting kids, stuff like that. And I finally, after a divorce, figured that I should get back into astronomy. So I bought an ETX 125, which I truly did not like. I've thrown away the mount for that, and the tube is still in my closet. It's good optically, but it sucked in every possible way. But then I got resurrected in terms of astronomy. So in 2009, I got myself my first proper mount, which was a Skywatcher NEQ6. And that was pretty nice. And I started fiddling around, and I only do imaging. Visual, no, not for me. It's fun to do when I'm down in France and stuff like that, but I don't do it from here. And in terms of work, I worked all my life with electronics, software development, and stuff like that. And over the past 17 years, I've been heavily involved in Arctic and Antarctic research. So I spend a lot of time in both up north and down south. And this has led me into forming a company which works with ice management, which in effect is keeping the ice away from offshore structures that need to do work in the Arctic. It's fun work. Sometimes it leaves a lot of time over for astronomy, and sometimes it does not. So then, the 10-micron products, what is all this about? Well, it's a very modern product in terms of the electronics and the working principles. It does have the absolute encoders, which of course we'll cover in more detail later. It's Italian, and maybe not so well known in the US, but the Italians, they're well known for their mechanical craftsmanship, and they turn out some pretty fine things. Fine mechanical things and also larger stuff. So they have this family of mounts, which many of you now have heard of and seen, and it starts with the GM1000, which is the smallest, and it moves up to the GM4000, which is a pretty big beast. The newest addition is the GM3000, and the GM2000 has quite recently been released in a refreshed version, a facelifted version with much of the drive system taken over from the GM1000 and 3000. So there's the family right now, and I guess the next one slated for an upgrade then is the only one who hasn't been upgraded, which is the GM4000. 10-micron then. If you Google 10-micron, you probably tried this, and you'll end up with 65,000 companies making filters for various purposes, where the size of the particles that it let through is just 10 microns. But if you find the mounts, you will find a company which is a subsidiary of Comac, which is the quite well-known and renowned mechanical company in Italy. So they've been at this for about 35 years, fine mechanical things. And about 15 years ago, they made a mount, and I think they just made it because they could, and that the manager and owner of 10-micron is very interested in astronomy. So he probably just took the shop and made a mount, and then it moved on from there. These mounts are distributed in Europe by Bada Planetarium in Germany, which is a company that actually goes back to, I think, 1885 or something like that. So they've been in the business for a while. And if you want to buy it in the U.S., I guess the official distributor, at least, is Deep Space Products, and Ed Thomas he's in Phoenix, I think. So little known in the U.S., better known in Europe. There it is. So these mounts are, in my opinion, extremely well machined. They put absolute encoders on all models nowadays. They started out without encoders, but they pretty soon did move up to a proprietary technology, which is actually developed by Bader and 10-micron together. It's 12 million ticks per revolution on the encoders, which is less than, for instance, a Renishaw high-res, but perfectly adequate for this purpose. The mounts all use AC servo motors. There are no steppers involved, and the AC servos, they do have certain advantages, and that's what they use in the mounts. And from I don't think the GM4000 has it yet, but the rest of the mounts have a first stage gear reduction, which is actually made with two belts. It's those modern small nylon belts that are very durable and don't flex or anything like that. They don't stretch and nothing like that. And it's a system where there's an intermediate wheel in the middle, which is mounted in some kind of spring-loaded fashion, so it's self-tensioning in a very nice way without flexing at all. All of these mounts use worm wheels and worms in the traditional sense, so it's not a direct drive or anything. And they use the B14 brass worms wheels, and the worms themselves are made out of some kind of perfectly excellent steel thing. I don't know exactly what they're made of, but it's steel. The control box, which is common to all models, does all the work, and it's actually Linux based, and it sits detached from the mount with one cable going to the mount. So these babies, they actually do unguided imaging, and you can even do it without using a PC because the modeling is all done in the box itself in the mount. So let's look at the different size babies that they have. The smallest one is the GM1000, and on this you can put 25 kilos or 55 pounds of imaging payload. It's not a payload specified for visual, but everything specified is for imaging. And here's what I think is a very cool feature of these mounts. They slew pretty rapidly. I haven't taken my calculator out yet and calculated how many X sidereal that is, but the smaller GM1000 slews at 15 degrees per second. While doing that, it will suck in 4 amps peak of 24 volt DC. And when it's just doing its thing, tracking, you can expect about half an amp of power usage, which is not bad. Being a fairly small mount, this has a 125 millimeter worm with 250 teeth on it. And I don't know what that's about. Well, a number of inches, let's say 8 or something like that. The worm is not that big. It's 20 millimeters in diameter and tempered alloy steel. So that's the smallest one. I don't know how well you can see the picture, but they're nice looking mounts. The GM2000, this is the Generation 2 version on the picture, and it takes twice the imaging payload, which is 50 kilos or 110 pounds. This is the fastest of them all, and you can slew this thing at 20 degrees per second, which is close to going ballistic if you lose the OTA there. But it's nice to see it do it, and a meridian flip is over before you notice it. It's very nice. It takes a little bit more power, being bigger, so 5 amps peak, still 24 volts, and you end up with 0.7 amps while tracking. The worm wheel is bigger. It's 172 millimeters in diameter and 215 teeth. The same with the worm itself. It's a little bigger, 24 millimeters, and the counterweight shaft is a 40 millimeter shaft, so it's pretty hefty. And the axis inside the mount are actually 50 millimeters, which is quite large. This mount is also available in an ultra portable version, and we can discuss at length how portable a mount of this size is. But nonetheless, you can split the mount in 2 halves, and you end up with the declination head as being one part, and the rest of the mount as which is the stand and the right ascension unit, as one part. And that brings it down to at least luggable condition, so you can hug it and haul it in your car and take it out to a dark site. They also have a nice tripod that fits this very nicely, which is called the Kentaur tripod. Extremely sturdy and very nicely machined. Upwards in size. Now, if you want to slam 100 kilos, that's supposed to be 220 pounds, not 110, of imaging payload on a mount, this is your friend. Being bigger, it slows slightly slower than the other two, 12 degrees per second, and still uses about the same amount of power as the DM2000, a little bit more while tracking.
Here.
So we're up to about 10 inches of worm wheel, 315 teeth, and the worm itself is up to 32 millimeters in diameter. 40 millimeters counterweight shaft, just like the GM2000, but the axes internally are 80 millimeters thick for the right ascension and 50 millimeters for the declination. This is also a mount that doesn't have frictions. So you're up in the size and type of mount where you have a worm engagement clutch instead, and that's the knob that you see on the connection box and right ascension motor box, which is on top of the lower unit. So the beast then, 330 pounds of imaging payload. Slower, of course. You don't want to go 20 degrees per second with this, so it goes 5. Takes a little bit more power, and well over a foot diameter of worm wheel on the right ascension, slightly smaller on the declination. And the axes are bigger as well. The counterweight shaft is 60 millimeters, which is, yeah, quite big. And the axes inside the mount are 85 for right ascension and 80 for declination. This is, of course, you need a crane to put this on your pier, but it's I've seen it in action with 6 scopes on it, and it's a beast. It's just incredible. So all these mounts. Yeah.
Ghislaine is saying he thinks the GMS 2000 has a 60 kilogram capacity instead of 50, as you wrote, and he also says good morning. He may not.
All right. Well, good morning, and you may be correct. So 60 it is then. Well, I'm glad because I have one. So thank you. Okay. The mounts share a lot of common features. They all use the same control box, which is the Linux-based industrial computer. It's a very nice unit. I've actually taken the lid off of mine, and it's one of those modern, very small things which you don't know what it is when you look at it, but it's a reasonably fast Linux box, and it does everything, including the in-mount modeling and the motor control. So with this, you don't really need a PC unless you want one. And as I'll show you later, there are examples of people who actually use this mount with imaging, while imaging without a computer at all. Now these encoders are absolute, just like many other mount encoders, but they're mounted inside the units in the proper place. You can open the frictions while the mount is on, running, tracking, whatever, and move it around, and it doesn't lose its position. You can pull the power plug, which, by the way, is not how you power off a mount like this. You tell it to power off, and it does just like any computer, it does a shutdown sequence. But if you just yank the plug and open the frictions and move it around and reapply the frictions and turn it on again, it'll know exactly where it is to the 0.1 arc second level. So it never loses its position, which is, to me, the only way to do an encoded mount. And as a consequence of that, there is never any calibration to do. with this at all. It always knows exactly where it is. And you can twist it around whichever way you want, and never loses its place. The handset, which pretty much does everything you want to do, including very advanced things like tracking satellites and everything, is common to all models. And the control box, which I mentioned on the last slide, does have both Ethernet and RS-232 connection, so you can run this straight off your local area network. And actually, which is not on here, but there is a Wi-Fi edition that you can have as well, which is installed at the factory inside the control box, and that with that in it, you also have Wi-Fi to connect to your mount. And it's a standard, for those of you who are a little network savvy, it's a standard TCP connection. You can actually talk to the mount firmware with a telnet connection or whatever you want. It does have a GPS port where you can hook up a standard serial GPS to it's a small RJ11 connector, so it's not a DB9 or anything like that. It does have the guide port, standard ST4, and that works as well, but obviously I never use it. Now all the units but the 4000 have a single cable between the mount and a control box, and this is something that was introduced by the GM 1000, then showed up in the 3000, and showed up in the GM 2000 generation 2, and I sort of expect it to pop up in the GM 4000 when it gets reiterated for the next cycle here. This is the handset. It's reasonably big, so you don't lose it in the dark, and it does have a dimmable red display. I don't know how much that helps for your eyesight, but it's red anyway. So as I said, full functionality. You can do anything the mount can do with this control box or this handset, and that includes simple things like telling the mount to flip at the current position. Finding objects, there's an object database in there, which is similar to most other hand controllers out there. It's reasonably weatherproof. It's made out of some kind of modern plastic material that doesn't break, and it's lightweight. One cool thing is that you do have the handset available on your computer if you're remote by means of a network connection or a serial connection. You can connect it to, for instance, the GPS port. You can connect your computer and talk to a virtual handset. So you get an application on your Windows PC, which is more or less an image of the handset, and you can fiddle with it on your computer, and it's in dual command with the physical one. So let's talk about the encoders. Everybody heard of Renishaw encoders, which is one of the finest manufacturer of encoders on the market, but they're expensive. And I guess 10Micron and Bader Planetarium decided that they could do it on their own, so they did. And they have created an encoder solution which is very insensitive to how you mount the read head, which is the biggest problem with the Renishaws. Now these are designed into the mount. They're not an add-on. There is no previous design that they have changed in order to accommodate the encoders. There is a previous design which is called the QCI series, which had a 1000, a 2000, and a 4000. Same capacitor and everything. And of course they took the mechanics, the inside mechanics, like the shafts and the worms and the bearings and stuff like that. But they changed the whole design of the rest of the mounts to accommodate these encoders. So designing them in from the start gives you a better chance of getting it right, because even though these are reasonably insensitive to read head mountings, it is a sensitive thing to do anyway. So with 12 million ticks, you're looking at about 0.12 arc seconds of pointing precision in the mount. So what they do is they mount the encoders, which is, you know, it's a sub-micron mounting thing where you have to adjust them very carefully so that they're reasonably centered around the axis. And then they calibrate them with a larger encoder. It may be a Renishaw, I don't know, but it's at least 10 times the resolution. And they model the encoder, and they create a mathematical table out of that and store this in the control box. So your mount will have a unique table for this unique encoder, which means that they're well calibrated from the start and don't rely entirely on the pure precision of the encoders. Now, these encoders are not just read out and corrections applied from the data. It's part of the actual motor control loop. So the feedback loop that drives the AC servos actually take the encoder as the input for detecting movement of the motors. There is, of course, a closer loop that works on the smaller encoder that sits on the motor, but the main feature here is that the encoders are actually part of the main control loop of the mount, which gives much smoother tracking than you would from creating corrections from reading an encoder and then sending commands to the mounts, to the mount firmware in order to obtain the corrections that you need. As I said before, the encoder is on the correct side of the clutches, which is good, so you can loosen the clutches, and the encoder is not disconnected from the axis. Now, these are always active as well. There is no way to turn them off. They're always included, and they can be used in two different ways, which is the single-axis tracking mode and the dual-axis tracking mode. The dual-axis tracking mode, of course, is the one that gives you the unguided imaging, because you're tracking the declination axis according to the model as well. But it is it's very nice to know that you can't forget to turn the encoders on. They're always there for you. And as I said, not off the shelf, not Renishaw, but proprietary technology unique to 10Micron. Modeling. This is, of course, the key to the performance of a mount of this type. So you need to have a model of the sky and the different mechanical defects of your system as such. So this controls both the pointing and the tracking. It's not something that's used to only create better pointing and hit your targets, but it also affects the tracking constantly through the control loop. So everybody's heard of T-point, which is Wallace's principles for doing mount corrections after a sky model. And the modeling that's used inside the control box of the 10Micron mounts adhere to his principles, which is using model terms that similar to a linear fit, or what do you call it? It's what you can do in Excel when you do a curve fit, a polynomial fit. It's similar to that, but in 3 dimensions and with a lot of parameters. The modeling inside the box handles the 2 sides of the meridian, which is often stated by other modeling producers or producers of modeling software to be a feature to handle the 2 sides of the meridian separately. And this mount does that, but only when it detects that the model terms for one side are different to the model terms for the other side, in which case it will keep separate terms on the 2 sides of the meridian. It will also model with weights up. The mathematics of the modeling are such that it will not care if it's with weights up or weights down. Now, one difference between the modeling in the 10Micron mounts, and which is about the only information you can get out of them, is that it uses a more advanced rotational matrix in order to better be able to handle large polar angle areas. And this was evident to me as my remote observatory in southern France, when I drilled the holes in the pier, I drilled them a little bit off, so I couldn't really reach the pole with the adjustments on the mount stand. And this cost me to run this mount for 4 months, I think it was, with 52 arc minutes of polar error. And it still tracked beautifully, unguided, with perfectly round stars, but I did have some pretty decent field rotation between the first sub of the night and the last one, which was kind of a bugger, but that's fixed now. Now, another thing is that the model is built incrementally, so you do not collect data and then crunch it and then enter a full model into the mount. Instead, every time you sync with modeling building enabled, a new point is added to the model, and the whole model is recalculated as if all the previous points were input at that time. So this makes it an incremental process, which is very nice. It takes 100 points in the model, which is less than all the others out there in the market, but I haven't found this to be a limitation. Actually, it was 25 before I suggested that they should increase the number of points. And they listened to that request and enabled the firmware to do 100 points instead. Right, I already covered this. It's incremental. So there are 11 complex terms described in the model, which can turn into 22 then if the sides differ. And this also includes, of course, the compensation for atmospheric refraction, which needs to be taken care of. And again, no computer is necessary for this. The mount will do it all on its own, if you like that. Just like astrophysics, 10Micron have, if not redefined the term sync, they at least have two versions of it. The one that aligns the model, which is what would be a normal sync in everybody's language, that simply takes the whole model as it is in the mount and moves it to the point that you're syncing to. And this can be convenient if your model has gone sour on you a little bit, which they actually do. Models have a finite life, and after a while you find that you're, well, maybe some tens of arc seconds off unnecessarily when you slew to your target, and you can then sync your whole model to that, and it'll work beautifully. The sync refine model is the building of the model, and this is set either from the handset with some clicks or with firmware commands. And as you will see when we'll look at the software that I wrote to create models, that software will put the mount in that position for you so that the syncs turn out doing the right thing.
Per, we have a couple comments. First of all, Ole is saying that he's seen the GM 2000 reported both ways, 50 and 60 kilograms. So you, I guess it depends on where you're looking. Might be reported on two different sites differently.
So Chris, I'm down to 50 again. Crap.
Back to 50. You might have been right. Chris is saying to generate an accurate model, then you need a very stable OTA. Reflectors with parts that may move would be less suitable than refractors, and he's asking that as a question.
That's perfectly true, and I'll come to that when we'll discuss the model making. It's one of the most important factors to consider.
Okay, and Eric is, and you might be getting into this as well. Eric is asking how long your average unguided exposure is, and I'll add to that at what focal length. But go ahead.
The best I've done, and I haven't tried anything longer, is 1 hour at 1,000 millimeters. That's my top of the chart thing. Usually I run between 15 and 30 minutes on most of my subs, and that's with a Tech 140. The Takahashi 106, it's usually slightly shorter in duration. So that's it. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So modeling, no computer needed is the title of this slide, and the points are there's modeling in the mount, so you don't need a computer. You can create the model with only the mount. You can do the polar alignment, and that's actually done from the model. We'll look at that in the workflow in a little while. It does track satellites from TLE files, which is two-line element files, which is what you need to get the thermoses of the satellites. You do, however, need a computer to download the TLE files into the system, and you need a Windows computer to do that. So with all these no computer needed features, you can do imaging with, for instance, an interval timer, and you don't have to fiddle with guiding equipment at all. So how did I end up with two of these? Well, in 2011, in the fall of 2011, I was looking at upgrading my NEQ6. And I went through a very painful process of investigation, and I'm sure many of you have gone through this process and ended up with some pretty good products. And I had a short list, which at the final stages, when I was about to pull the trigger, had a software BISC on it, it had astrophysics on it, and had a European mount called Gemini, which is a friction mount. It had the ASA direct drives on it, and it did have a loss Mandy. Now, first to go were the Gemini and the loss Mandy, and then I was left with the three BISC, AP, and ASA. And then, from out of the blue, I stumbled upon something on the internet with the GM 2000, and I said, "Hey, this looks." After a minimal amount of research, I ordered one from Bader Planetarium, drove down there, and picked it up. And I more or less bought it unseen, I should say, but it turned out okay. So when I got it, it was February of 2010. No, sorry, that's wrong. It was 2012, February 2012. No ASCII driver was readily available from 10Micron at that time. They hadn't produced one yet. Instead, they relied on the fact that the mount protocol, the firmware command protocol, is based upon the LX200 protocol with some of the astrophysics extensions, and astrophysics is also based on the LX200 protocol. So they relied on you using those drivers, which didn't really work out too good. There was no automatic modeling software. It was all manual from the handset. So I should mention that I did have a mishap with this first mount. I took it down to France on my first visit to Olli Penrice's Lagrange down there, which you may have heard of, and it actually exploded on me. With smoke coming out of the thing and everything. So I packed it up and used my NEQ6, which I happened to bring along as extra luggage. And at that time, we thought that it was the one of the cables that was shorted from transport. And it turned out that as late as this January 2015, I again took out the power supply that I got with the mount, which I hadn't used since then, and it turned out to have 45 volts between, negative 45 volts between protective ground and the minus, which was what fried not only that mount, but the 3D printer that I was going to use it for this January. So that was a toast. Anyway, I took it back home, got a new control box from 10Micron, and did first light on the balcony. I did a quick polar alignment, not very accurate, on the tripod. I did 15 manual syncs from the handset, and I shot a 10-minute exposure unguided, and it came out with perfectly round stars, which was, to me, just magic. It's just fantastic. So at that point, being a software developer, I decided to dig into ASCOM and see what that is. So I wrote an ASCOM driver, which is still in development and being released regularly. And I wrote an application called Model Maker, which automates the process of making the models, if you have a Windows PC, that is. So the smaller one, which can be seen as a typical 10-micron mount, has all the normal features. There are knobs for various purposes, and you can adjust the elevation and the azimuth of the mount so that you fit your polar conditions. You have nice boxes over the motors, which are better than the ones that was on the old mounts, which had the motors more separated. These are truly built into the mount with nice cases over them, which is nice. And it's there's nothing magic to this. It's very traditional. There are no magic things to do. It's if you look at the advantages of this little mount on the market, I'd say that it's reasonably lightweight. It's not really lightweight, but it's reasonably lightweight. It's well built. It performs well unguided, and it does share everything with the other mounts in the series. It's reasonably quick to set up. We're looking at, say, 12 to 20 minutes, depending on how much modeling you want to do, or even an hour if you want to do a lot of modeling. It slews reasonably fast, 15 degrees per second, and it will track anything with a TLE file. I'm in the process of, now that I'm in the light season, I don't have any astronomical darkness anymore up here. So I'm looking at trying to catch the ISS at some point. And all I have to do is download the TLE file, and I've tested the tracking but not imaged yet. This thing, of course, nails the target every time. Even if you flip and slew around, it'll always get back right on to the arc second, which is nice. And it does balancing in the handset. And it's a very accurate balancing. And you balance the mount down to 0.2% of perfect balance, which is, or that should be perhaps 99.8 then. It's very simple to do, and it tells you exactly if you need to move the counterweights out or in, or if you need to move the scope up or down and the dovetail, and it just works. I've tried running the mount reasonably unbalanced, tens of percents, and it works fine at that point too, but I guess it says in the manual 0.2%, so we'll do 0.2% since it's simple. There are also cons with this mount. I find the GM1000 a bit tedious to use in terms of the knobs, especially the frictions are difficult to tighten and loosen. This prompted Bader Planetarium to produce a tool which you can download the file from their site and print it on your 3D printer, or you can buy one for a reasonably small amount from them. And it's like a little wrench that fits over these knobs and makes it nice and easy to do the adjustments. Talking about adjustments, when you set the polar alignment on this, it tells you to do, say, 0.06 turns on the left knob from the handset. And you say, okay, 0.06 turns, how much is that? And when you do it, you tend to overcompensate, which means it's somewhat coarse in the adjustment knobs. I don't know if you can do much finer a thread, but it's still a bit coarse. The GM1000 has had a number of firmware issues, most of them related to guiding. And as far as I know, these were solved last year, so it now guides fine. But there were some issues with people guiding these mounts, and it overcompensated and oscillated a bit after compensations. The dovetail thing is it's built in. It doesn't come off, and there are no alternatives to it. So you're stuck with that one. It cannot be changed. It's a very good dovetail, so that's not a problem. But if you want to use another one, you're out of luck. The other mounts in the series, 2000 and up, they have options in terms of which clamp you want to put on there. So these are the cons that as I see them. Not very many, but nothing is perfect. So let's see how this works. This is going to be a video that I took Thursday of my mount on the balcony, which is my experimental pier. I don't do much work here. So let's see if it comes on here. It does. So this is my my horizon is not very good. I also have the house in the way. Everything is mounted in the gray cabinet that you see there, and the mount is on a pier, welded steel pier, and sits outside. This has been outdoors now since last summer. Now here's a flip. I'm going to flip this mount at this point, and you'll see what it does. And that's flipping at 15 degrees per second, and it takes less than 20 seconds to do the flip. So that's the smaller balcony baby, and many of you hang on cloudy nights, and I think I published a number of pictures of the GM2000 down in France. Obviously, I can't do much there right now. It's actually raining right now as well. So let's look at the what you have to do to get them going. You need to be level. Some mounts you don't have to be level, but at this mount you need to be level. And it's because of the modeling, and it's because the fact that you have to make some assumptions as to some axis somewhere being straight. And it's much easier to have it. It will set up fine if you're not perfectly level, but it's better to have it level, especially if you want to do the center a star polar alignment instead of the turn the knob 0.6 turns thing. So what you do is you set it up, you rough align it to north and the elevation of your latitude. A compass is fine. I usually go into Google Maps before I do an off-site thing and just check out some feature in nature that's north from my intended position, and that works just fine. Then you put your scope and the rest of the stuff on there, tidy up your cables a little bit, and do the balancing. The balancing will slew the mount back and forth in 2 different positions for each axis, and will give you the numbers to how much you should move your telescope on the clamp, or how much you should with your counterweights on your shaft. After that, it's time to polar align. I usually do this with Model Maker, which I will demonstrate shortly. But you can also do it with a handset. It's not a big thing. You use 3 stars to start with, and then you refine it with a couple of stars more. So with Model Maker, you create a model that contains at least 3, preferably 5 or maybe 10 points. Then you run that model, and the mount will figure out how it is configured and oriented, and then it'll tell you in the handset how much you need to twist the knobs, or you can do the center of star, the polar alignment thing. After that, the model is invalidated. Now, there are a couple of other products on the market where the model is not invalidated after you turn something physically on your mount. In my view, that's absurd, because if you're going to keep the model and just compensate for what the user probably did, you end up with a precision that's not on par with the rest of this mount. So when you touch anything on your rig, a knob that adjusts the azimuth or the elevation, then you need to clear the model and redo it. because the mount has no way of knowing that you actually performed the movement exactly as per the instructions. And we're talking sub-arc second precision, so it's just necessary. So you clear the model, you rerun it, and consult the handset again. Usually that's enough. Yeah, you can do one more time, tweak the knobs, or you can do 2 more times, and you end up well under half an arc minute in polar error. That's usually not a problem at all. I usually leave it if I'm less than 2 minutes off the pole. That's fine. So after you've done the polar alignment, you run a model of your choice, which can be large, up to 100 points, or you can run a 25-point model, or whatever works. If you have a very rigid rig with a nice OTA and image train and a focuser that doesn't sag, and there are no mirrors that shift, then you get by with smaller models. After you run the model, you image. There's one more point to note here, and that's the fact that running a model with Model Maker can be done before it gets really dark. You can do it in the twilight period. So you end up losing absolutely no imaging time, even if you run a 100-point model, which actually takes a while to do. So what I did was, just like the little clip from the balcony, I logged into my observatory in southern France, where I had my GM2000 with a Tech 140 and a QSI camera on it, and cleared the model and ran a model for you. And this is in a separate video that I should have prepared here. Now let's see if we can get this running. I'll try to narrate it. So this is Model Maker as it looks in its currently released version. I click the mount button to connect. I use my own ASCOM driver. It's the only one currently that works with Model Maker. Look at the settings. In this case, I'm telling it that the syncs should append to refine the model and how fast I want to slow, in this case 14 degrees per second, and that I want J2000 coordinates, and little things like that. And then just click OK, and it'll connect the mount and tell you what mount you have and what firmware it has. Then we connect Maxim, because that's used for the imaging. Now there are a couple of parameters over here, which is how much of a binning you want on your camera, what the exposure time is, the plate solve expansion for pinpoint and things like that, your latitude. I set these to 4 seconds exposure and bin 2. And then you just click where you want your model points. Of course, you can save the model and read them from a text file and whatnot. And it's divided into 3 base points and a bunch of defined points. And this is not really necessary, but that's the way I wrote it, so that's the way it is. And we're going to do a pretty small model, just a couple of points. Now, Model Maker will do this now in the order which I click them. It can also do them in azimuth order, in which case you let it sort the points. Now at this point, when I have all the points here, all I got to do is make sure that I'm going to do both the base and refine points, that I want to clear the model in the mount, and it's a live run, and then go. So it'll slew the mount. First it deletes the model, then it slews the mount to the first point, which is now indicated in yellow. I don't know how much the resolution lets you see here, but there's a yellow ring around the point that it's aiming for. So it's crossing the pole there and zooming down. So it's slewed, and at that point it'll shoot a 4-second exposure. And when that's downloaded, it will solve it. And pinpoint solves pretty fast, so it's never a long wait. At least not that long. There we go. It's 4 arc seconds off in RA and 294 is in DEC. It's just not a problem at all. It'll continue like this, and we can fast forward a bit here and let it zoom around and do the different points. Now these are added to the equation. So as you see, the numbers now are errors of 0.5 arc seconds and 4.7 arc seconds, very much lower. Just hide this Google bar here. And we'll move up to the point where it's done. It's coming up on the last point here. There we go. That's going for the last one. There's the slow done. These mounts take a little while to settle after a slow. This is without a specific settle delay, but it still wobbles a little bit and adjusts itself. So the last point came in at 0.67 and 0.67 arc seconds of error. Now Model Maker loads the model parameters or downloads them from the mount in order to display them for you, and it turns out to have 4.26 arc seconds of RMS expected behavior. You can graph this and see which point is which error and how much or which direction they're pointing, where the error is pointing at. And there's nothing above 10.1 arc seconds of error in this model once it completes. So the 294 that you saw in the beginning, that's gone because the model has been refined and that point has been re-evaluated against the final model, at which time it then came in at a very much lower value. So let's continue this here now. You all hang in?
We're all doing well.
Good.
You know, Eric is asking a question. If you're setting up fresh every night, you do have to redo the model, correct?
Yes. Yes. Yep. You have to do that. And actually, if you have, for instance, if you take off your OTA overnight, you'll actually do pretty well with just one align on the model when you get going. But if you take the mount down, yes, you're going to have to redo the model. No way you can redo that.
And
building
on the question we had earlier about reflectors, Ghislaine is saying you might have had an OTA that didn't work well with the mount, and I don't know if it was a reflector or just something with flex, but
yes, that's true. I've modeled these mounts with a refractor that never worked. I don't know why, but I guess it wasn't rigid enough. That was a William Optics FLT 98 with the feather touch focuser, but it never modeled well. I don't know why. The Skywatcher 190MN, the Maxitub Newton, models fine if you modify the main mirror cell and you put a decent focuser on it. The Tech, of course, models perfectly, the Takahashi as well. I've tried the Edge 925 from Celestron, and there's no way you're going to model that thing. The mirror is all over the place. And when you're doing unattended imaging, you need to autofocus, and so you can't have the mirror lock on. And it has a corrector lens in the bottom of the OTA, which means you can't put a Crayford back there or something like that. So you end up with the focusing of the main mirror, which is total crap. So that never modeled at all. So there are good ones and there are bad ones, but yes, your OTA should be on par with this mount in terms of quality and perhaps price. All right, I'll move forward here now. Now, taking out the virtual hand pad, because I did this from my home where I'm sitting right now, and the mount is thousands of miles away, so it's got to be the virtual handset. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slew this thing to M13 just as a test, and that's in the refraction. Or sorry, I'm going to first show you the information that comes out of the handset. So it tells you that it's aligned with 18 points. There is a polar alignment error of 2 minutes and 17 seconds at 61 degrees. And this is what I need to do to obtain perfect polar alignment. So 1/10 of a revolution on the right knob and 0.03 revolutions on the elevation knob downwards. This is not doable. It's very difficult. So it's better to center the star in that case. It also tells you how many model terms it's using and the orthogonality error, which after my shimming the tech is pretty good. I'm 7 arc seconds off in orthogonality, which is good. All right, moving on. Now we'll issue a slew to M13 from the handset. So this gives you a glimpse of the handset as well. Slew to it, and as you can see, model maker is still tracking the mount in the background, and it's a pretty quick slew. Now this ends up right above a tree, fairly low. It's at what, 45 degrees elevation or something like that. And I'll bring in the maxim window now instead. Take out the camera control, do a 30-second lume exposure, which we can fast forward past because I didn't cut it out of the video. There we go. Let me back up a little bit. There we go. Now it's going to come into view here. There we go. And there's your M13, 30 seconds. So let's go to another object, the star, Spica, or Spica, whatever. And this time we'll do a half a second quick exposure. This is all bin 2, by the way. And see what we get. And for a 18-point model, we're what? 10 pixels off? Something like that. Now, we'll do 300 seconds, which will fry Spica for us, but it'll show us the roundness of the star. So this is 5 minutes. The model is very, very little. It's a small model. That was a fast forward, so we're approaching the end of the 300 seconds here. And here comes the explosion of light of a 300-second exposure of a bright star through a Tech 140. That's pretty fried, but I'm taking out the measurement window now instead. I'm looking at the small star, and I'll stop this right here so that we don't lose that. I don't know how much you can see, but the flatness of this star right now is, if you know maxim, it's 0.006. So the roundness of this thing is, it's round. That's just the way it is. And it's that star, that particular star is at the full width, half maximum of 3.115. So all in all, that's 5 minutes. It's nothing, but it's still, it's a round star, and it was a small and quick model. There we go.
Per,
Yes.
we actually have Ed in the room, Ed Thomas in the room, and he said he made 2 points actually, that he's had luck with the Edge HD 1100 with a mirror locked and a rear cell Crayford, and I've heard a few people putting Crayfords on the back of them, even with the correcting lens. But he's also saying, and then he had another comment that the reason for the settling time after your slew is because the speed of the slew, the 15 degrees per second, which to me sounds really, really fast, and when I saw it in your video, kind of confirmed it to me. That's a pretty fast slew.
Oh yeah.
But
well, I mean, every OTA can probably be made to do it. I had a reducer at the back of mine, so there was absolutely no way I could get an additional focuser on the back, or I would have done that because optically that's a great scope.
Yep. Yeah, with SCTs, a lot of stuff you could do. You just have to work through some of the issues.
Yes, yes, that is so true. All right. So again, then you need rigid OTA and imaging train. You need access to live pressure and temperature. You don't need it, but it's good. Pressure and temperature tend to change over the course of an evening, and even during the course of a modeling run. And if you can update those continually, that's fine. That's, by the way, supported in the ASCII driver that I wrote. It can take a source and update the refraction upon the onset of each slew, which is pretty good. At some points, you will end up with a couple of points in your model showing excessive errors. Now, obviously, your scope is not gonna, your system is not reliably gonna do that hiccup at that specific point in the sky every time completely reliably. So a massive outlier with, 25, 50 arc seconds of error at one single point, they should probably be deleted from the model and considered to be Gaussian exceptions, which are on the on the high side, and should be just deleted, which can be done with Model Maker. You just tell it to delete the worst point, and it'll do it, recalculate the model, and you end up with different values. Now, the flexure that can be modeled needs to be consistent and perfectly repeatable, and it will model it. But then you'll get low values for the final RMS, which is very good. Now, the refraction. This is it's been a debate on cloudy nights a little while back, where we had a lot of discussions on the need for doing atmospheric refraction compensation. And you really need to do this, because the closer you get to the horizon, the worse it's going to get. And we're dealing with a mount that's capable of tracking and pointing with potentially sub-arc second precision, which means refraction is going to come into play, because it's in the minutes when you're down there. So my driver takes this to a new level. It updates upon each slew the refraction, or when it's not tracking, it will update it every 2 minutes, which is pretty good. And I also designed a USB device weather station that delivers data to the driver. It can be used with anything, but it's a little USB stick that looks like this that I'm actually putting into production, and Ed will sell it in the US for me. So this is a commercial venture for me, which is not yet started, but I'm just putting the website up, and we'll see what comes out of it. It's a low power thing, it's self-contained, and delivers temperature, absolute pressure, humidity, and dew point. You can talk to it from any system. It comes up as a USB serial port, so data just keeps flowing. It's pretty nifty. So, some obvious question that I came up with is, unguided, really? How consistent can you do this? How do you dither when you're running unguided? A lot of people dither with the guider, and that's an issue to be considered. So why would you use it without a computer? Is there a specific purpose for this, or is there a point to it? How about weights up usage? Can you do that? Why not? And what else? And what software can you use for the mount? So I'll go through these quickly, these 5 points. Unguided, I'd say yes. You need the stable rig and the good model. It doesn't take long to get going. Some people think it takes forever to get going and you lose a lot of imaging time. You don't. And the ultimate question is, do you throw away subs due to guiding errors or tracking errors in this case? Yes, I do. I actually do that. First of all, you have to set your standards. And even though it will usually give you perfect subs, there are times when it doesn't. When the model is deteriorating slowly, you maybe need to rerun it. You can get some elongation on the stars. Now, I do, however, throw away tons more subs for other reasons than guiding. And it has to do with, thin cloud. Somebody walked by my observatory and turned on the flashlight. Somebody turned on the infrared camera while I was imaging. Things like that, and it's usually not the guiding or the unguided performance that's the problem. Dithering, well, if you want to run unguided, you can't have PhD dither for you. So that means that you need to have a software that supports dithering by means of slews or the ASCOM move axis commands. You prefer the slew because then you can have the refraction updates become automatic, which is good. So in my brief excursion into this, Maxim will do it, ACP will do it, CCD Autopilot, they will all do it. The SkyX, I don't know. Sequence Generator Pro will not do it because it relies on the guider to do the dithering. So that's just, it'll change. I mean, when mounts like this become common, people will put support for unguided dithering as well. So why would you want to use this thing without a computer? You're going to image anyway. Well, there's one guy, Tonk, you may have seen him on Cloudy Nights. He uses a 1000 with a Canon DSLR and an interval timer. And he does unguided imaging with this with perfect result, and he has a 20-minute setup time outdoors, including the model, and he never loses any imaging time because there's a twilight zone of at least 20 minutes, so that's not a problem. But even if you do have a computer, like I do, I have a complete observatory, tons of computing power available, having a self-contained mount removes one potential source of problems. I know for a fact that some mounts, when they lose the connection with their controlling computer, will not even track. They'll be completely lost. This is not a problem with this mount, so in my world, it's very nice to not have the mount being dependent upon a computer. Weights up, well, this is a big fuss. You see them at the fairs, and they show you how they can swivel the mount around the RA axis, you know, forever. And well, that's nice, but if you can do a flip in less than 20 seconds and it's dead on target, I don't see a problem with a flip. And you usually don't end up with any waiting time for flips either, because you have a zone which extends plus minus 30 degrees of the meridian in which you can perform the flip. So it does weights up, sort of, 30 degrees up, and it's not an issue. I always let it flip at the meridian because it doesn't matter to me, and because my camera will hit the pier if I go past the meridian. So that's weights up for you. Software, generally, well, ASCOM, of course. Not only is there the driver I wrote and that you can download for free, there's also a 10Micron's driver, which is in some respects a better driver because it's a full local server driver minus an in-DLL, in-process DLL. ACP is fine with this mount. I run it. I also run CCD Autopilot on the balcony. Maxim, fine. The Sky, I do that too. I run it with PhD. I run it with Sequence Generator Pro, Count the CL, etc. It's not an issue. This is just as usable as any other mount. So, handheld devices and software, iOS and Android. So, well, any app that will talk to an LX200 will work, basically. I tried Sky Safari on my iPhone 6 myself, and in that case I have the mount connected to my local area network with a wired network connection. And the phone, of course, is on the same local area network but with Wi-Fi, and I don't need any hardware, no magical devices, Sky-Fi or whatever they're called. This works straight out of the box because the Sky Safari application will just connect with TCP to whatever port you tell it to connect to, and there's the mount, and it talks LX200, which works. So it works. There's also another interesting feature with these mounts. Well, when you use the Ethernet connection, you can take many clients. The mount control box will accept several connections to two of its ports. So having like 4 different software packages on your computer all connecting to the mount at the same time is not an issue. Of course, if one issues a slew, the other ones have to consider that somebody else issued a slew, but that's a problem even if you use an ASCOM hub, which you don't in this case. So you can also, at that scenario, you can also use ASCOM compliant things and non-ASCOM compliant things at the same time with a mount, which I think is a really cool feature. Gentlemen, ladies, that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Per. Another comment from Ed, and it's in regards to in your model maker, when you're making the model, you can actually specify the RMS as a goal. Instead of saying I want 15 points or I want 20 points, you could say I want 1 arcsec RMS or 2 arcsecs RMS, and we'll keep going until it hits that.
Well, you call me if you get 1, okay?
Well, that's why I corrected myself. I thought about that for a while, but
no, I can tell you, just as a meaningless fact, but you usually get with a good rig. I got 4.26 on a single run with my rig down in France, and you aim for 3 to 7 or arc seconds of RMS error all over the sky.
Interesting. I saw horizon limits as well. Is that in your program or the ASCOM driver?
It's in my it's in the model maker itself. It takes a text file with positions around the sky, spaced whichever way you want. You want a few points because I draw straight lines in the graph, which means if you take 4 points in a circle around, you're going to get a square. But anyway, you input a number of points that you can measure with your mount or whatever, and it goes into Model Maker. And the main purpose of the horizon limit is just that there's a button there that says Clear Model Below Mask. So you can load a mask from a file which contains 100 points, and at the place you're using it, you may want to clear the stuff that's below the mask. So that's what it's for.
Gotcha. And how about if your camera or your telescope impacts the pier? Does it cut out the motor in any way, or is there any protection? That was a question from the Q&A.
Yes, of course. Yes, it does. I seriously don't think you can do much damage to your equipment with this. You can, of course, if you're going 20 degrees per second and you hit the pier, yes, but you're not going to have that kind of speed when you approach the pier because it slows down. There's a ramp down. But tracking against the pier is definitely not an issue.
This is a very interesting mount. It seems we all need, to be a premium mount, it has to have the performance. But between the Ethernet and the hand control capabilities, this is a very interesting mount. Just, I think it's beyond any of the other mounts I've ever seen out there.
Well, like I said, I bought it on scene.
Yeah. And obviously, anyone in the room is, we're kind of opening this up now. If anyone out there in Q&A has any questions, feel free to ask them. Anyone in the room, the same. But yeah, I'm pretty impressed.
Well, that's good. It's it's like you buy this big Mercedes-Benz, and you're not gonna walk around telling people that oh, what a crap car I bought. You're gonna advocate what to sort of justify your own purchase, your waste of money, and these mounts really gave me what I paid. I got good value for money when I bought these mounts. Really, I'm very pleased with them.
It actually seems like everyone that's purchased these has been pleased with them. I've seen Tonks, some of his comet shots, and most of his DSLR stuff. He does some great work. And then you see Unguided, and you're just kind of surprised by it that much more. And thanks again for staying up late. What time is it?
It's now 4:54 in the morning.
4:54. Yeah, thank you very much for staying up. I'd feel really bad if we weren't astronomers. Now I only feel a little bit bad.
Well, the thing is, Adam, that I never do astronomy at night.
Yeah, I guess that's a visual thing. We're sleeping at night, right?
Yes.
That's the point of the good hardware. That's the point of all this stuff. If you're
Yeah.
standing right there by the telescope, I guess you can correct it. But yeah, if you want to do it unguided and from your bed, it's a different type of astronomy.
Definitely.
So I'm not seeing any new questions. I do want to thank everyone in the room for coming, and I just want to remind everyone, next week David Alt is going to be presenting on manual image integration in PixInsight, and he always has a ton of great information. I'm still watching some of his older videos because you learn something every time. And I again want to thank Per for staying up late and giving us a nice demonstration of 10-micron mounts. And I'm going to give you all out in the room one more chance. I'm going to review all the comments one more time. But if not, we're going to either let Per get some sleep or have some coffee, whichever one it is.
Yeah, I have a question. You can hear me all right. How does the mount do in the cold weather on your deck up there in Sweden? Is it how's it do?
It's not really a problem. The mount has a feature where they use the motors to preheat the mount, so that's to be used at, say, minus 15°C or worse. For me, all I do is just in the wintertime, I just keep it running. But I have started it cold, and it's not an issue. It fares very well in the cold.
Do you change the slew rate at all in the cold weather like that, or just let her rip? When it's cold.
For my balcony setup, if I slew 15 degrees per second with a steel pier firmly bolted into the balcony, my neighbors are going to have some say. So that's at 5. But down in France, I slew full speed, and it gets cold down there too. It's up in the mountains. So I have it at 14 in France.
Okay, thank you.
Great presentation. Thanks again, Per. I don't see any more questions, so you are welcome to come back anytime you'd like. We'll whether it's to speak on 10 microns or anything else you're working on, whether it be that USB temperature, humidity, pressure dongle, or whatever it is you'd like to come on. But thank you very much.
All right, thank you, and everybody take care, and I'll head back to bed.
Yeah. All right. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks out there. See you next week.
All right.